This is Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty. Greetings, wrestling fans, and welcome to Wrestling Nostalgia, a podcast that focuses on wrestling history. I am your host, Dave Dynasty. Thank you for joining us. I know I say this every time, but man, we have a really great episode here today for you. I have an hour-long interview with legendary referee James Beard. Now, James is a guy I wanted to talk to for a long time, right? Obviously, because his career warrants it alone. Lots of stories, man. We didn't even touch on even a portion of them. So hopefully I'll have James back in the near future. But James is a guy that's obviously very relevant to speak to at the moment because of his connection to world-class wrestling and the fact that he has an appearance in the new Von Erich movie, The Iron Claw. So I thought, this is the right time to pull James off the list and tag him in and let's interview him and talk to him. And it was a great interview. James is a lot of fun to chat with. And again, I can't wait to do it again in the future. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about a whole lot because, like I said, this is a really great interview that I want to get to. But one thing I do need to mention is, well, first of all, Happy New Year, right? This is the first episode of 2024. The holidays are now behind us. Hopefully, everybody had a good holiday. Hopefully, everybody had some quality time with family, some quality rest time, and hopefully, everybody feels refreshed and geared up for a strong 2024. And I'm not a huge resolution guy, right? I do set goals, but I set goals all the time. I'm a list guy. I'm all the time making lists and goals of things I want to accomplish, both daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever it is. I have varying degrees of goals, and I love that satisfaction of marking something off my list. But one thing that I can hope for is that, man, I just, and this is what I always want, man. I wish people could get along a little better, or at least be a little more respectful in all facets of life. But, we focus here in the wrestling world, right? Wrestling is what it is. We all love wrestling from one degree or another, right? No matter whether it's a particular territory, a particular promotion, a particular time period, whatever it is, we all have a love and passion for wrestling. So let's be respectful of other people who have that love as well. And hey, we don't all have to agree on what we like. We don't have to all agree on what we enjoy. But hey, man, let's just have a little respect, have a little common courtesy. You can have debates and discussions on things without it turning nasty and ridiculous. So let's do that, right? And so that's my 2 cents. That's all I'm gonna spend on that. One piece of news, though, I do want to speak of is the passing of Killer Khan. I loved Killer Khan when I was young. I loved him breaking Andre's leg. I loved his feud and his matches with Hulk Hogan. He was, I think, an underappreciated heel, right? He really had that menace, and that was kind of a bread and butter of wrestling at the time, right? That foreign menace, and he was great at it, and had just his facials and his look and his appearance were scary, right? They were what they should be for a villain. And, he was a perfect adversary for some matches with Hogan, right? And that long list of heels, nasty heels, big heels, whatever you want to call them. All the heels that, were fed to Hogan during that long run in the 80s. He was a perfect guy to be on that list and have some matches, right? Blew the mist, did different things. Really was perfect in that role. And very, I don't know, again, I think he's very underappreciated. When I was a kid, I always wanted a Killer Khan action figure, right? And outside, I'm sure there's some stuff that came out in Japan of him, but there's nothing stateside, right? There was no LJN, there was no Hasbro, there's no nothing, right? No Mattel or Jakks or anything. So, not to my knowledge, has there ever been an official release of a Killer Khan action figure stateside? And man, that's pretty rough. That's pretty wild. I thought, man, Killer Khan would have made a great LJN, right? I mean, that would have been cool. That would have been great. But I always wanted him when I was a kid so that I could add him to my collection. But needless to say, sorry to hear about the passing of Killer Khan. He was, again, what I said, great at what he did, very underappreciated, and one of those lost talents to the time of wrestling. Right, a lot of people look back on that time period and some of the rivals of Hogan and Andre and different things, and I don't know if Killer Khan gets spoke of enough in that, but so anyway, sorry to hear about the passing. Hopefully everybody will look up and watch some Killer Khan matches and gain a new appreciation for him in his career. All right, but speaking of a great career and appreciation, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I'll have that phenomenal interview with legendary referee James Beard. So stick around. If you like horror movies, be sure to check out Dave Dynasty and Ike Isaacs on the Listen to Their Screams Horror Podcast. It is available on all podcast platforms and on social media at Listen to Screams. That is Listen, the number 2, and Screams. All right, and welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. At this time, I'm joined by legendary referee James Beard. James, how are you?
I'm doing well, Dave. How you doing?
I am doing very good. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for making time. You've been on my list to talk to for quite a while, and I thought, well, you know what? Now's the time. It's a relevant time to talk to James Beard, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But you're a guy that I wanted to talk to for a long time. You got a lot of stories to tell, and I'm ready to dive into them.
All right.
Well, before I like to start by asking people, how'd you become a fan of professional wrestling?
Oh, I don't. It's kind of hard to say how I became. It's just something that happened. I watched it from the time I was just a small kid. Watching it on old black and white TV. We lived about 90 miles east of Dallas, and didn't have any cable. We just had an antenna, and sometimes you could pick up Dallas stations pretty well. Sometimes you couldn't, but we usually watched wrestling on Saturdays. Came out of the Sportatorium and out of the Northside Coliseum in Fort Worth, and it's just one of those things that I guess it's just a natural thing to do at the time. Folks watched it, and I watched it with them.
Yeah, and I've listened to some other interviews, and you were an athlete. You're growing up. I heard you played some sports all the way through college, I believe. Did you ever think though, hey, this wrestling thing's something I want to do? Was it ever an aspiration for you?
I don't know that I ever really aspired to be a wrestler. I was always interested in the business and always interested in maybe being a part of it at some point. But I was as I grew up, I played sports, but then I got involved in music, and I played music for a long time, and that's really kind of what led me into wrestling.
Yeah, well, tell us about that then. How did music evolve to wrestling?
Well, I'm playing in around the Dallas area in different places here and there, and got to know some of the guys that come out, and I'd meet some, and more as time went by, and that eventually they'd start talking to you about it, and the topic would come up, and I'd talk about wrestling, and then I guess some of them started figuring out that I kind of had a clue. I'd been watching it a long time, and they eventually started. Actually, it was mostly Bruiser Brody. He kind of pushed me into it. He just kind of said, I think you'd be good at this, and eventually, he just kind of said, you need to try getting involved, and I stuck my toe in the water for a while, and while I was still playing music, and then eventually it became kind of in demand, and I had to make a choice. And
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny when you look back on Bruiser Brody. He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways, because you've seen some interviews where he kind of breaks kayfabe a little bit, right? He kind of lets you peek behind the character a little bit. He was obviously that independent kind of guy. Went where he wanted, never really signed contracts anywhere. Obviously, stood up for himself when he thought he was getting shorted pay. I'm originally from Indiana. He had a run in with Bruiser, Dick the Bruiser, over pay. Stood up for himself. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the stuff what Bruiser Brody was doing is kind of the norm now. And I think he was kind of ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he was very complex in a lot of ways. He was a very intelligent guy. And,
yeah. He started out as a sports writer. Is that correct?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He was a sports writer, and then he eventually got involved in the business because he was an athlete too. He played college and a little bit of pro football, and he kind of like myself. He kind of got drawn into it a little bit, but he always kind of had a little a way of thinking out of the box sometimes, and he was definitely different in that way.
Yeah, I agree. And you started, I think, around 1986, and you talked about these guys talking you into it and you getting into it. 86 in Dallas, it was a little past the prime years, but there was still a lot of great talent there. Still a good time for Dallas. let's talk about you guys. Let's talk about Bruiser Brody. We talked about him a little bit. At this time, I think Bruiser was a big face in Dallas at that time.
Yes.
Talk to me about Bruiser Brody. What was he like working with?
Well, I mean, he was one of those guys that his style was one of those things where you just basically kind of stay out of the way, you know, as a referee. You're not you're basically going to have a brawl. And that's just the way it was. Now, he was capable of working. I mean, you know, he had some 60-minute matches with Flair, and if he wanted to, he could wrestle.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But that's not what they paid him to do.
Yeah,
you know, they paid him to be Bruiser Brody, and that's what he did. And you know, he in that respect, he was very different than a lot of guys to work with, because you just, you know, if as a wrestler working with him, you had to fight back, and as a referee, you just kind of chase him around, you know, and stay out of the way.
Yeah, he's a fascinating man, a fascinating. It's always that one of the big what ifs. You know, obviously what happened to him in Puerto Rico hadn't happened. Of what would have, you know, had been long term, because he had a great mind, right? Like we talked about, he's an educated, smart man, had a good mind for the business. I think he could have, if he had chose, right? Because that's the thing with Bruiser Brody. He's not going to do anything he didn't want to do.
He had a desire to at some point. You know, he knew that there was an end to it, into his wrestling career, and he had a desire to do some things afterwards, probably staying in the business somehow, maybe even having his own promotion. And he probably would have been very good at that.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. A great guy, but and obviously also around that time, obviously Kevin Von Erich were still in Dallas.
Yes,
you hear all kinds of stories, obviously, about Kerry and Kevin. They're, you know, obviously the most known of the Von Erichs. What was it like working with them? Because you hear lots of stories about you know, Kevin being a little stiff, Kerry, you know, for lack of a better word, Kerry being a little I don't know how to describe it, right? A little flaky, clueless. I don't know how you want to put it. I don't mean to disparage him, but you know, a great athlete, great wrestler, but you know, not always mentally there. What was it like working with them?
Yeah, they were very different. Kevin was very aggressive. He was a guy that basically, you get in the ring with him, you better fight back. You know, he's just going to keep coming until you stop him. And he would work with you if you did, but you know, as an opponent of Kevin's, you could get ate up real quick if you didn't fight back, and he would just keep coming. Kerry, on the other hand, Kerry was a great follower. He was a guy that if you put in the ring with a good wrestler, or somebody who could call the matches, then he could have great matches with anybody.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a guy who was going to lead a match. It just wasn't his style.
Yeah.
He could do anything. I mean, he had all those Von Erich boys were well trained. I mean, you know, there's people kind of think that they were pampered and all this kind of stuff, but no, they went through the mill, you know, and they were well trained. They just had different styles, and Kerry was just different from Kevin, and David before them was different from those two guys. He was more of a classic guy. He was a little bit more like his dad in some ways, but he was really more the worker of all three of them.
Yeah, I mean, because you hear a lot, you know, right? Because you know, everybody thinks about the Von Erichs in Dallas, but they got around. They worked a lot of different places. You know, St. Louis. David did the stint in Florida as a heel. You know, Kevin would. They went everywhere. They could work. They were versatile. They could you know, work anybody. And you do make a good point, Kerry. Yeah, I mean, you think of the greatest Kerry matches, and they're guys against guys like Flair, Lawler, Hennig, the guys that were going to lead the match, that were going to call it. And then that's something to be said.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just,
no.
That's just the way he was, you know. I mean, I knew a lot of guys that way that weren't great leaders, and generally those guys were baby faces, pure baby faces.
Right.
And Kerry obviously was that,
Yeah.
that's what it was. And you're right. They got around a lot of places, and they were very successful in places like Missouri, where,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not a great wrestler, back in those days, you weren't going to get
Yep.
over in Missouri.
Nope. Absolutely.
And they, they did that and
Yep.
did very well there.
Yeah. St. Louis is often viewed as the grooming for the next world champion, the world champions. And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and the Von Erichs were big successes there. And
Yes.
then there was obviously, then there was the controversial Lance Von Erich, who was brought in, right? Obviously not really a Von Erich. That's all been covered. And, but, while people now looking back kind of laugh at it, Lance was over. He was brought in, he played the role. People didn't know any different. Everybody thought, hey, that's Waldo's son. And he was over, and it, the Von Erichs were always, there was a multitude, right? There's at least three. You go for those 6 men, and they needed another Von Erich.
And that's why he was brought in. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Mike was having problems, and David had died, and there were only two. And that's why they sought him out. I don't know why people blame Lance. He seemed to get a lot of criticism for it, but the truth is that he had an impossible situation. He was brought into the most high-profile family, I guess you could name in wrestling at the time, and he was really pretty green when he was brought in. I mean, he had worked a little bit up in the Northwest, but he really wasn't an experienced wrestler when they brought him down here. I mean, it was kind of like a rushed type thing, and in my opinion, I always had a feeling when they decided to do this. I always thought, it would have been more interesting and better to have brought in a European guy that was experienced, that was say a guy like Fit Finley, somebody like that.
Yep.
And have him come in as more of a rough edge, instead of being just exactly like the other boys.
Yeah.
And at some point, when at some point you had another angle built in right there. So, if you wanted to do that, so there was, I just think it was a mistake to begin with, but, and kind of a rush deal. And it was unfair to Lance, really.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, I understand that there was an issue, there was a problem. They tried to solve it the best they could, I guess. And it didn't work out. I think they kind of underestimated maybe their fans and their crowds, but hey, that's part of wrestling. You win, something happens. During this time, though, like you said, you were working there, in the late years of World Class. But again, still, some good stuff going on. Do you have any moments or matches that really stand out for you? You grew up a fan of World Class, watching World Class, and then here you are, in the Sportatorium, working with these guys. Do you have anything that really stands out to you from your time there at World Class?
I don't know about particular matches. There's been, when I think about matches that I enjoy the most, a lot of times there are matches that happened on the road somewhere, like on a spot show or maybe an undercard match or something that was just really good and that kind of thing. I've always been kind of the one that I never was really, all that hepped up about high profile matches. I enjoyed being in those situations, but they weren't always the best matches. The best ones sometimes were like undercards. I remember one with Brian Adias and Gene Kaniski's son,
Nick.
No,
Yeah.
it was the other son.
Oh, Kelly.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best matches, I think Brian was Texas champion at the time, but one of the best matches I've ever seen. And it was just it was an undercard match, but those are the kinds of things I think about when I think about my favorite matches, but the experiences of working with the guys like the Freebirds and working with the Von Erichs and working with guys that everybody knows, those names, Kabuki and Chris Adams and Ice and all those guys. It was just a surreal experience almost.
Yeah, Iceman Parsons. I always loved Iceman Parsons, and I always thought he was so underappreciated. That man could talk. There is still lines that guy that Iceman Parsons said in World Class that I still use to this day when I'm talking to
Well,
people and joking around.
If you watch some of Rock's
Yeah,
interviews,
yeah.
he ripped them right off the Iceman.
I am all the time saying Raggedy Rudy Poo, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's all because of Iceman Parsons.
Yeah, there's no telling how many times I was in the ring with Ice, and I always enjoyed it. He was such a great, and he enjoyed being a heel more than he did a babyface,
Yeah.
and we had so much fun. It was just those guys were just a joy to work with. They were all so talented.
Yeah, and what was it? So, what was it like working in the sportatorium? Because you hear stories, right? I mean, that it wasn't a great building. I mean, that's I think a universal accepted. But back in those days, these places they had character, right? They had a feel to them.
Yeah.
They added to the show. What was it like, especially with you? You grew up on World Class. What was it like working the sportatorium?
It was an atmosphere that you can't just create and manufacture. It just has to be there, and it was really special. I mean, yes, it wasn't a pretty building, and yes, it got hot in the summertime and it got cold in the wintertime. But the atmosphere, the feel, the fact that there wasn't a bad seat in the house, the look it had even on TV, it had a great look.
Yeah.
It was a special place. I still think about it every Friday. I think about I need to go to the sportatorium, and of course it's not there anymore. It was a special place. When I did this movie that's out now, the first day I walked on set and they had recreated the sportatorium, I walked in there and I looked and saw what they had done, and I almost cried. It was just incredible. It's a special place.
Yeah. That leads me to what I was going to talk about, the Iron Claw next, right? It was a movie, right? It's out now. It's getting a lot of talk, and and you're in it, right? You play a referee, you play an official, and so how'd that come about? How'd you get the cast into the movie, and what was that like working on it? You obviously mentioned what it was like seeing the sportatorium set, but how did that happen?
Well, I was, in fact, I was traveling by myself. I go into somewhere in Louisiana, and I got a call from my friend Tim Storm, and he had talked to Luke Hawks, who has been involved in a lot of movies and TV shows and that kind of thing, and Luke was involved in the casting of the movie, and he had asked Tim if he thought I would be interested in doing that, and I said, well, yeah, tell Luke to call me. I've known Luke a long time, and he did. And I said, yeah, I'll be interested. Next thing I know, I'm getting information from, inquiries from A24, getting vetted. You have to go through that. It's almost like going into the Secret Service to get it vetted.
Yeah.
But, anyway, I went through all of that process and everything, and then when I showed up on the set, they all knew my background, knew who I was, and they kind of leaned on me. Chavo Guerrero was the wrestling director, and I'd worked with Chavo before, and of course all of his family, and they kind of leaned on me about, did this guy do this, or how would he do that, and and how would he react? And so I'd been in the ring with all those guys, so I was able to kind of convey some of that to them, and they were very receptive for that. Zac Efron in particular, he'd say, well, how would Kevin do this, or how would Kevin do that, and I'd show him or tell him, and he would do it, and it was just an amazing experience, really.
Yeah, I can imagine, and especially for someone who grew up watching that, working with these guys.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot of talk, right? I mean, there's a lot of historical. The dates are sometimes in the movie a little mixed up and different things.
Yeah,
it's not a documentary though, right? We have to remember that it's a Hollywood movie.
Yeah, that's what I try to tell people. I knew all those guys, and I lived through a lot of that, and knew what the history was, and how things happened and all that, and yes, the timelines were changed, and there's some things that aren't historically accurate, and some things that were added just for dramatic effect,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that's a movie,
Yep.
that's what
Yep.
it is. And if it were a documentary, then yeah, you could pick it apart,
Yep.
and justify it by doing that. But I don't understand I mean, I do understand. I understand that fans and some of the wrestling smarks out there want to show how much they know by saying
Yeah.
this, that didn't happen, and that didn't happen this way and that time and all that. Well, yeah, we all know that, but
Yeah.
it's not what it is. It's a movie.
Yeah.
Just sit back and enjoy it for what it is, and honestly, it's an incredible movie. The acting is
Uh-huh.
A1 first rate. I mean, it's Oscar worthy acting, and the script is incredible. It was shot, it was highly produced. It's just an incredible movie.
Yeah. More than anything, I am so glad that there's a movie out there that is getting attention, that's in the theaters, that has a good cast, that's being talked about in the mainstream, that is based on wrestling, because wrestling doesn't get a lot of that. And it deserves it, right? Because if you're, there's a lot of stuff in wrestling that's ready for the big screen. That's just, you don't even have to write the script. It's there.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
the characters and the stories are there.
yeah, and that's what this is, and it's I tell people it's not really a wrestling movie. It is obviously based on a wrestling family, and wrestling
Yeah.
is in. And I think the actual wrestling in the movie is the best I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah.
And part of that is because the actors actually did the wrestling scenes. I mean, there's not they don't start a move and then cut away and then cut back to them after they take up the bumps have been taken. They do it.
Yeah.
And it makes it look more real. And that was one thing Sean Durkin wanted to do. He wanted to make sure that everything was as realistic as possible. And he told me, he said, when you're in there, just work it like you would work a match,
Mm-hmm.
vocally, everything. And that's what I did. And that's how we shot those scenes. And I think they came off that way.
Yeah. And Luke Hawx and Chavo Guerrero are two great guys to have to do that, because they understand, right?
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah,
great wrestlers, great careers, and they understand the Hollywood side. So they can merge them perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a first step. You got guys at the bottom there that were teaching. They were teaching these guys wrestling moves before we even started shooting, and
Yeah.
so they had some preparation before that. And they did a magnificent job of showing them this and showing them that. In fact, those guys were doing some things that I saw guys that worked for 3 or 4 years and couldn't even do right, but they were very adept at it.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the actors have, in interviews have talked about, their respect for wrestlers now and what they do and everything. So those are all positives. And who knows how many people are going to see this movie and then say, hey, this is, that was good. That was interesting. Go out and search, go on YouTube, go on Google, look up the Von Erichs, actually watch some matches and go down those rabbit holes, it's anything to get some toes in the door for some people to take an interest in this is a good thing for me.
You could feel their respect for what we do when we were shooting the scenes. I mean, it wasn't like we're actors and we're going to do this and we're not going to do that and all this kind of thing. They were insistent on doing it as realistically as possible. I mean, even Hiro Koda, who was the stunt director, he was trying to make sure everybody was safe, and that was his job,
Yeah.
And he would bring in the landing pads and stuff for these guys, to rehearse with and everything. And then when they'd figure out what to do, the actors would say, take those things away. We're going to do it just like the rest of it, And so they were taking those bumps and everything right on the on the ring, and doing it just like we would do it in a regular match. And you could tell how much they respected what we did, and that meant a lot, and it made everything a lot better, I think.
Yeah, I'm hoping it opens some doors for maybe some other movies, right? Some other, because again, like we said, there's a lot of stories in wrestling that would make great movies that the general public would love.
Absolutely, yeah, and like I said, it doesn't have to be a wrestling movie. There's a lot of human interest stories in wrestling that are just there. this one, of course, is got a lot of tragedy involved in it, and it's one of those things that I know had to be hard to write the script for, and
Yeah.
and then find a way to shoot it and make it not such a downer all the way through. I mean, and and I think Sean did a good job of that, and they found a way at the end of the movie to kind of bring a little hope, I guess,
Yeah.
and I think that brought everything together.
Yeah. And from what I've heard, that Marshall and Ross Von Erich Atkinson, I think they have a bit part in the movie. Is that correct? I think they're in a scene wrestling in the background or something.
They were in the ring while Kevin was up he's like in the office looking down on the ring, and there's two guys in the ring working out. You can tell that they're just kind of working out, working on a match, and then that was Ross and Marshall.
Yeah. So tell me what you think, having known the Von Erichs, having met so many of those guys. Tell me what you think of Ross and Marshall.
Oh, I love those guys. They're first class people to begin with. I mean, just great guys, and they're both very athletic. They're both pretty well trained. I mean, they went to Japan and trained.
Yep.
And I think if they had just strictly concentrated on wrestling and been in the right situation, they probably would have been big stars right now.
Yeah.
If they're put in the right place, and used correctly. But yeah, they're great guys, and like I said, first and foremost, they're just good people. But they're very adept at wrestling. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I agree. We had them on the show a while back, and yeah, they're just such gentlemen and such good guys. And I love it. I love guys that can bridge the history and the past to the modern, right? I mean, these guys, they've appeared on AEW recently, and people are really receptive to them because they know who they are. They know that past, and and everybody talks about the Von Erich tragedies and the curses, blah 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 and blah blah. Well, here's a little hope, right? Here's Kevin's kids, Fritz's grandsons that are out there and still and doing this what their family did, and that's hope, right? That's hope for the Von Erichs to write the chorus.
And that's kind of where the movie takes you at the right place. It takes you to that point to where I can tell you for a fact that Kevin never believed in a curse.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But if you believe in some stuff like that, then it shows kind of a place where maybe the curse was broken.
Yeah.
If there ever was such a thing, and those boys kind of represent that hope, and they do that in the movie, even as young kids. So
yeah,
it's a downer story to tell, but it's got some uplifting parts to it, and it's got some funny parts. I mean, it's got some comedy in it too. It's just you just know that that's kind of what happened here and there, and funny scenes. So, but it's really just a very good movie.
Yeah, I agree. I hope everybody will go give it a chance. And like I said, coming out of the world class in those last years, you were kind of there when things transitioned over to Jerry Jarrett, and the USWA, and then it seemed like there for a while then that hey, things kind of revitalized with Jerry coming on. So when Jerry first took over and it switched over to the USWA, what kind of differences did you notice there in Dallas?
The revitalization, the kind of rebirth really came before Jerry came in, and that was kind of the predecessor to it was when Eric Embry took over the book.
Yeah.
And Eric started. He basically he didn't have a lot to work with. A lot of the guys were scattered, and we were using a lot of the guys that lived around the area, that had kind of been there for a while and that kind of thing. So there wasn't a lot of money, and he was doing a lot with a little, and he took it and ran with it, and he kind of became a Stone Cold before Stone Cold, really.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't look the part. I mean,
yeah.
Eric's a smaller guy, didn't have a great body, but the way he worked and the way he presented things, he just turned everything around. He caught the imagination of the fans, and the fans started coming back again, and that's when they led into Jerry coming in, and of course they brought an influx of talent. A lot of the Memphis guys started coming in, and there was a different style, and some of the fans, had to kind of adjust to that a little bit, but it was fresh and it was new for them because they hadn't seen a lot of these guys, and it was different, definitely different.
Yeah, it's like you're reading my notes, because my next question was about Eric Embry and how underappreciated he was. I was a huge fan of Eric Embry, still am. He's one of those dream interviews, the guy that I'd love to talk to. Like you said, he didn't have, he wasn't a big guy. He didn't have that physique, but there was something about him. He went by flamboyant, and he certainly was. He hooked you.
Yeah, technically he was really good. I mean, he was well trained. He as a heel, he was a smaller heel, but man, he was like a buzzsaw. He was just incredible, and he knew how to get heat, and he understood that heat was what sold, and when he flipped things, it worked just as well the other way. And that was his philosophy. If I can flip this, I can become. He really had to trust himself, basically. Eric was kind of, you saw Eric running in on this match or running in on that match, and at first, you think he's overbooking himself, but then you start realizing, hey, this is working.
Yeah.
And that was the key to bringing it back around, and he knew how to do it, man. He understood that philosophy that heat sells, and he just flipped it around the other way, where the other guy was getting heat, and he was he was the recipient of it, but he was also the hero, and it just worked.
Yeah, he always had me invested in. I think it was when it came down with that match with him. I think it was P.Y. Chuhai or whoever it was.
Mm-hmm.
When he beat him, and they took down the world class banner and raised the USWA banner, and man, it was like, you felt like, there's, everything's been saved, everything's been, he knew how to hook you and how to bring those fans in and get you invested in what he was the story he was telling.
Yeah. Well, it was bittersweet, seeing the world class down, but at the same time, it was time for a change there, and it probably would have been a lot better if everything had worked out, business wise with Jerry and Kevin and all. That turned into a bad situation, but and then the funny thing about it is Jerry Jarrett told me several years later that was his favorite time in wrestling, and which surprised me, because I would have thought that it had been frustrated and have a negative feeling about that time. But he told me that was his favorite time, and which is baffling to me. But you never know.
Yeah, and like you said, there was we didn't know it at the time as fans, but there was a lot going on, right? The family, the Von Erich family, still owned the world class name. So when Jarrett kind of took over there, he couldn't use the world class name, which is why they transitioned to the USWA, the Memphis name.
Right.
But later, Kevin did try to bring world class back. And it didn't last real long, but started out kind of hot. It dwindled off pretty quickly there, it seemed like. But what was that revival like?
Yeah, it didn't have a chance. There was no TV. They had lost channel.
Yep.
And at that time, I was traveling to Japan a lot. I also worked with Kevin when he did that too, but mostly did a lot of house shows, and worked in the sportatorium a little bit, but there was no TV, and there just wasn't a chance. There was no way. And then too many negative things that happened, I think, and it just kind of went its own way, and then a couple of months later, I get a phone call from Mac, and he said, we got another group coming in here, and that was Joe Pedicino and Global, so it didn't stay gone very long.
Yeah. Like you said, Joe, came in with the Global Wrestling Federation. had a lot of great talent and a lot of guys that beyond global went on to really big careers. I mean, it's it's like they had a lot of young guys that were really great. So when that came in, and after the USWA thing and after the missed revival, did everybody kind of feel, hey, this is the thing that's going to bring Dallas back to a little prominence?
Yeah, there was a lot of hope there, and we thought, and I think Joe Pedicino thought there was a lot of money there, to finance the thing, and as it turns out, the money wasn't necessarily what he thought it was going to be, and and that that kind of killed that little project, and then. There were a bunch of guys coming in, a bunch of young guys that know today, or have known as being big stars later on. They were there and gave a lot of guys a lot of exposure, and it was a great experience. Like I said, I was traveling back and forth to Japan a lot during that time, so I'd be gone, but they even used that. They made a big deal out of that. I was in Japan working for Global. Which I wasn't, but it sounded good.
Yeah. Well, one thing that Global, even to this day, is really known for, people talk about, are the matches with the Lightning Kid and Jerry Lynn, and those still get talked about a lot. What was it like firsthand being there for those matches? At that time, could you feel, hey, this is maybe a glimpse at the future of what wrestling's going to be?
Yeah, I had no doubt about that. I was, like I said, I was going back and forth to Japan a lot, so I was seeing what they were doing. They were taking a little of the Japan style, a little bit of lucha and some traditional wrestling, and mixing it all together and making a whole different style out of it. And those guys were so athletic and so smart. That they knew how to do that, and that was fun being in those matches. Those guys were very inventive and it's just a blast to work with. But yes, I knew at that time that this is going to catch on, and the next thing you know, everybody's going to be following this. And if you think about it, that's really the predecessor to a lot of the what you see in some of the things today, although some of it's not nearly as good.
No, right. But that's kind of what I was leading to, right? With the TV exposure they had, and the fact that Global was seen by a lot of people. And I remember seeing those matches and thinking, oh, what is this? This is not your typical wrestling. And so I assume, like you said, a lot of guys who were young, who were wanting to be wrestlers, would look at that and say, that's what I want to do. I'm not 6'6" and 300 pounds, but I can do that. I can be athletic and do that style. And you're right. That hybrid style I think they were the kind of the forerunners of that.
Well, and it wasn't long after that till you start seeing the Benoits and the Eddie Guerreros and the and Dean and all those guys that are coming in and all those guys that were that smaller size, but they were just so athletic and so well schooled and that was a wonderful thing. But the sad part about it is like a lot of things that become I guess the thing. A lot of guys saw that and they didn't understand that there was a lot of solid base behind all of that.
Right.
The psychology was always there, and they instead of building on that, a lot of the things I see today are just the moves. The psychology is there,
Right.
And but if you go back and look at it, that's where all that started.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't really watch a whole lot of modern wrestling. I try, but I just can't. It doesn't hook me. It doesn't invest me. There's not that emotion. Because like you said, it's just they're like they're mimicking the moves, right? They're great at doing the moves.
Yeah, that's what I'm missing, and that's why I can't watch either. To me, wrestling is about creating an emotion, creating a feeling, and that's first and foremost. And if all the athleticism and everything in the world doesn't do you any good if you can't do that. And that I see a lot of great athletes and a lot of incredible things done in the ring these days, but I'm really missing that psychology. I'm really missing that when a match is over with and you know exactly what they were trying to say and what they were trying to do.
Yep.
There's some exceptions, obviously, but
Yeah.
As a whole, there's too many of them that, like I said, they took the athleticism, but they forgot that there's another thing there, that element that's really missing.
Yeah, and I also think there's a lot of variety missing, right? You saw a Lightning Kid and Jerry Lynn. It was different. It wasn't the same old. And guys looked different shapes, different sizes. You had big guys and monster guys and ugly guys and your athletic guys and your buff guys. And now it's just, I don't know. Everybody seems to look the same. And there's not variety.
That's another thing. A lot of guys don't look athletic either. But
right.
They look like guys that should be paying to get in. And I understand, not everybody's going to be buff and all that, but at least look the part, whatever that, and I miss that too. That's true. That's one of those things, when something starts, it sometimes it gets carried too far.
Yeah. Yeah. And another highlight of Global is that, hey, you worked some matches with Bruce Pritchard in Global Wrestling.
Oh my God.
And it's especially funny to look back on it now, knowing Bruce Pritchard and what he became and where he went. But how in the world did that happen? That James Beard was working Bruce Pritchard in several different matches. There was tag matches. There was, I think, a boxing match.
Yeah.
What was going on? How did that happen?
That was an Eddie Gilbert idea, and Eddie comes from that Memphis school.
Yeah.
So he's always thinking out of the box a little bit about things, and he came up to me one day and he said I want you to drop refereeing for a while and wrestle. And I went, what are you talking about? Because I was kind of helping Eddie with with the booking, kind of his right hand man there in Dallas, and he said, I got this idea, and he told me what he wanted to do, and it started out crazy and ended crazy. I mean, it started with me there was a battle royal, and Bruce was a manager for several of the guys, and Dark Patriot was one of those. That's Doug Gilbert.
Yep, right.
Mike Davis, and anyway, they were involved in the battle royal, and Bruce jumped up on the apron to do something to help one of his guys, and I reached up and grabbed him and I pulled his pants down. And of course, knowing Bruce, he had a pair of like a G-string on. It was a horrible scene. And of course, I laughed at him, and everybody laughed at him. And as I was walking out, his guys attacked me, and Eddie came down and made the save, and that's what led to all the matches. And we had all these different matches and things, and it ended up with a match between Bruce and I, where you had to pull the other guy's pants down, and Bill Irwin was the special referee. So, It was fun, but it was it was nothing. I mean, it definitely wasn't classic wrestling. But it one of those things that Eddie came up with that people were interested in it because it was different, and they watched it. My friend John Layfield, JBL, he does that podcast with Gerald Briscoe.
Yeah, right.
He was on me about that. He wanted to try to find tape of it, and I kept telling him I sure hope somebody burned those things. I don't know if he ever finds it, I'm dead. But,
yeah, well, I hope he does. I want to see it. They got to be out there somewhere. And it's funny because man, Bruce is kind of a I don't know how you want to put it, a divisive guy nowadays, right? Because people know him from he's got a big podcast, and he's a WWE executive, and he's the guy that did Brother Love. People forget Bruce came from Houston. He was under Paul Bosch. Yeah. He was a fan, man. He was just one of us, and the guy had the passion. He has the passion, and people forget that.
Yeah, he and Tom both they kind of grew up there around Paul Bosch and that atmosphere. Bruce was, he was selling programs and doing that kind of thing. Maybe doing, I don't know, he might have done some photography too. I don't remember, but he just, he just kind of worked his way up in the business, and and he ended up on that end of things. And of course, Tom was more interested in actually getting in the ring and working, and he's become maybe, at least one of the top 2 or 3 trainers in the business. It's just incredible. Both of them are very different guys, but they're both, incredibly successful in what they've done.
Yeah, man. Again, Tom Pritchard, so underappreciated. He
Oh,
is
man.
silky smooth in the ring.
I've done clinics with Tom, and he's just he's
so smart,
so incredible.
Yeah. And man, you've worked, like you say, you talked about Japan and Dallas, and you worked in WWE. You've worked virtually everywhere. You've experienced. We didn't even talk about. You've done a lot of other things, right? You've been on the the NWA board and done things with them and different things with Hall of Fames. You've done so much in this business, so many different sides.
Yeah, and really, my interest in when I got into the business, of course, I started out as a referee, but I was always interested in getting involved in other areas and aspects of the business, especially the creative side. And that has led me to doing all kinds of different things in it. I've done a little promotion. I didn't particularly care for promoting side of things. It just it's a dog eat dog kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of headaches.
Like, book me and I'll show up. But the creative side of it, I've always enjoyed, and I still do that. I've worked with a group here in Texas that I've gotten a lot more involved with in the last several months, and I'm writing the format for them and starting to book the matches and the angles and that sort of thing, and that's something I've always enjoyed doing, and that really started in Japan. I got that opportunity to do some of that over there with my Kendo Nagasaki, Kazuki Sakurada, actually his real name, but he's the one that brought me to Japan the first time, and when the company we were working for split, he took a group and took me with him and gave me a lot of responsibility, and that kind of carried over to States, and really just kind of put me in a different situation, in working, and I've always enjoyed that part of it.
Yeah. Tell me what some of the differences you hear a lot of talk about the differences between the Japanese crowds, and working in Japan and working in the U.S. Tell me some of those differences, right? Because you hear the Japanese fans are a little more. They have this respect, right? It's a little different.
It may have changed some in the last few years, I think. They've gotten a little more westernized, but when I first started working over there, the Japanese crowds were they were what I would call smart, but very, very polite, and they didn't react a lot to the same kind of things that you might react to in the States, when guys was getting do some cheap heat, that kind of thing. They didn't care for that. They wanted to see guys, just an escape, something like that would get a big pop, or anything. They appreciated the technical side of things, I guess, a little bit more. And of course you had the media over there, the newspapers and
the magazines.
They treated the business like a sport. And that was one of the reasons why I loved it over there so much, because you got treated that way. You were respected for what you do. And over here it was, you had the fans, obviously, but then you also had the general public who kind of scoffed at it a little bit. And there's just a whole different atmosphere over there for how they treated the business and how they looked at you, and I love that. I love that part. But the fans were a lot more reserved and a lot different over there back in those days. I think it's probably changed some, but back in those days you had to really be on the top of your game to even get over there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's different. Yeah, it's different now. You hear guys say, "Oh, they." I don't want to put anybody down, but you hear a lot of guys now talking about working in Japan, but they're playing, paying their own flight and their own stuff. I'll do whatever to them, but that's not the same. It's not it's different.
When I first went to Japan, they were flying us over there business class and put us in the top hotels and treating us like stars. It was a whole different thing. Yeah, it was different. But you had, like I said, you had to be at the top of your game, and you didn't get to go over there just to go. It was it was a real honor.
Yeah. And they love their wild monsters, right? Their Hansons, their Funks, their
Oh yeah,
Vaders, their Brodies, man. They love those guys.
yeah. They do kind of their that goes back to that Godzilla thing, I think.
That's right. Yeah. they like those
Yeah,
Western
yeah,
monsters.
yeah. Bruiser, Stan, they come out and swinging chains and
Oh,
chairs and everything else, and
yeah.
well, they would scatter.
Yeah. So like we said, we've talked about all the different things you've done and whatever. Is there something that you wish you could have done or done more of in your career that maybe you didn't get to do or didn't do enough of for your taste? Is there something that you always wanted to do, or like I said, do more of?
You know, of course, I think maybe being involved in a creative situation at a higher level, maybe, I guess.
Yeah.
But my biggest I guess not yet. Yeah, I guess is how I'd put it. You know, I've always had this real desire to create an alternative, to be a part of that. You know, where you're not following the crowd. You know, like that it tends to happen with most promotions come up and they do what everybody else is doing. And I've had that opportunity a couple of times, and always something happens that screws it around. You know, and and that's been my biggest I guess disappointment in the business more than anything else. But as far as getting to do things, you know, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to do a lot of things at high levels and with very good talent and you know, I'm still trying. You know, I'm still trying. You know, that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this group in Texas. Is, you know, and I don't have any aspirations of it being a competitor to WWE or anything like that. But I think there's still a fan base out there that wants to see something different.
Yeah.
And I'm, you know, that's my goal, is to try to get to a point to where that's a little more mainstream, I guess. And I thought I had it going at one time a couple of years ago with a group here in Texas, and a couple of things happened, and it just blew up. And that seems to be what happens with wrestling promotions, I guess. But
yeah, was that the SWA? Is that what that was?
SWE, yes.
Yeah, SWE. Yeah, man, I watched them a lot online. They had, man, there was. I know some of the stuff happened, but man, there was some good stuff going on there.
Yeah, we were that was all my baby. I mean, we were cooking. I mean, as far as the cooking, and we were doing really well, drawing well. Had a lot of TV things. Probably had too much. They probably one of the things they did that made a mistake is trying to get too big too quick. But but there were other things that happened with individuals that got involved. And you know, I'm not going to name any names, but that's been my biggest frustration in this business more than anything else. You know, that one thing in particular really was a frustration, because I really thought we had something going.
Absolutely. There was a lot of buzz, and there was like I said, you know, a lot of people, when you went online, said, "Hey, look at this thing in Texas, man. This is fun. It's a throwback, right? It makes you remember what you loved about wrestling, but it had that enough modern in there, right? That, you know, it was like a fresh take on it. I mean, it was great stuff. I was watching it all the time. And we won't rehash what happened. People can look that up. It's all out there. But
when it blew up, I was kind of like at the point where I was like, I'm done. I don't want to do
it.
You know, and for a few months, that's the way I felt. And then I got this call about this group, and they were kind of waving in the wind a little bit about as far as angles and direction and that kind of thing goes. And I've been with them a few months now. And we're starting to put together more consistency, and the talent's getting better. And I'm hoping that maybe it's a second chance to do what I didn't get to finish there. And that's what we're getting closer. We got some good talent, and the matches are beginning to come around to that. It's called Texas style wrestling, and it's beginning to start to look that way. And I've got hopes for that. And that's. So I'm, it's kind of like Ack told me one time. He said, "You can't retire from this business once you."
That's right.
He said, what happens is you either die or quit getting booked.
That's right.
And I'm living proof of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Once it's in your blood, man, it's hard you can't let it go. And
Yeah,
I mean, that's what passion is, though, right? I think
it
that's.
is. It is. Yeah, that's it. When you love something, that way, and are that passionate about it, then you just can't let it go. And I hear people all the time. You say, and there's been a few examples of guys who walked away and never looked back, but not very many. For
Yeah.
the most part,
No.
if they walked away or they got left behind or whatever, if you go back to them right now and say, hey, I've got this thing, and they'll jump right back into it.
Yeah.
It's something that you can't get out of your blood. It's like music,
Mm.
same thing.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
I can't get that out of my blood either. I still do that.
Yeah.
It's just yeah, it's just the way I'm wired. I can't
Yeah.
help it.
All right.
Yeah.
So you're still out there playing?
I do some stuff with some guys here locally occasionally. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What
And
do you play?
uh, I,
What kind of music?
yeah, it was mostly did country and
Okay.
I even do some stuff at church now.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, yeah. And actually the musicians at church, they had hit records back in the '60s. They were that good.
Yeah.
And I've known them for forever,
Yeah.
and that's how they kind of drew me in there. So I do some stuff with them nowadays, and they still go out and play other places too. But,
Yeah.
so I get my fix that way.
Yeah, there's always been a good music scene there in Texas, and I'm a big blues fan, man. I always loved Texas blues, right? Stevie Ray Vaughan and some of those guys. That's some great stuff. And
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, the most of those, even like ZZ Top and
yeah,
they were a boogie blues band, and all
hmm
that kind of same derivative.
yep, yeah. And we talked about you've done a little bit of everything, and that's not even mentioned. In 2013, you released a book titled "The Third Man: My Life
Yep.
and Times Inside the Ring and Out."
Yep.
What inspired you at that time to write a book?
Well, I had been doing some articles here and there with from websites, and they'd come to me and ask. Kayfabe Memories was one of them.
Yep, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they'd asked me to just write a story once a month or something about that. First, I think it started out just global mostly,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, at some point, people started saying you need to put some of that together in a book and that kind of thing. And I thought, well, it's just kind of a waste of my time, because I don't think anybody would want to buy a book, and uh, eventually, actually, Dutch Mantell kind of talked me into it. He said, "Yeah, you need to go ahead and do this," because he'd written something and
Mm-hmm.
done pretty well with it. And Mark James is his
Yep.
publisher. And Mark said, "Yeah, put it together, and we'll put it in a book." And so I did, and I rewrote some of the stories I had already written and added some stories to it, and then I wrote mostly about the guys that I worked with in the Texas area.
Mm-hmm.
The Freebirds, Chris Adams, Ack, Gary Hart. There's a chapter on a lot of those guys, and then I added a few other little tidbits in there here and there, and one chapter about refereeing, just my thoughts about how it should be, and I get a lot of calls about that, do clinics because they want your guys to read this, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And it's been a good thing for me. It's been well accepted, and I still carry a few books around with me, and I've got another book that's almost finished. That actually I haven't finished it, but I'm adding a little bit to it right now that I'm hoping to have out this year.
That's good. Yeah, so I was going to ask you because I'd heard in an interview that you this was from a few years back and said you were working on a second book, and
Yeah, it's one of those things that take. That first book took forever to write too, and this one's taking even longer because part of it is I just didn't know how to end it. I didn't know what the end was going to be, because
mm-hmm.
what do you do, and
Mm-hmm.
what's the theme, and most of this is going to be some stuff in about my Japanese time in Japan and about global and about some work I did overseas, like in Germany and other places, and stories, just some road story type things and that kind of thing, and probably about the NWA when I was working with them closer, being in the office there,
Yeah.
and the sale of the NWA to Billy. I was in the middle of all that.
Oh yeah.
And about kind of what I'm doing now. The things that have happened in the last few years that I never dreamed that would happen when I wrote that first book, the Hall of Fame deals and that kind of thing. It just it's been like a whole new career in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I'm a book fiend. I'm addicted to. I buy books. Oh, I have so many books. My wife tells me I need to quit buying, and I have so many wrestling books, and I'm always excited when I hear someone is coming out with a new one. So I'm excited to hear that you're going to come up with a second book.
Yeah, yeah. But I like to read too, but
Me too.
this one it's been a long time coming, and I've had most of it done for a long time, and I just never felt completely comfortable with everything, and I'm getting really close to. In fact, I thought I had it finished, but I'm going back and rewriting a few things right now, and trying to get it ready to send off to get a little critique and and that kind of thing, and hopefully my goal is to have it out before the summer.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine it's hard because it's like, you haven't hung it up. You're still you're still out there doing things, and so it's like all the time new stories that tell.
Well, when I wrote that book, when I was writing it, I thought I was kind of done. I mean, not I mean, I knew that I'd be doing this and that and the other, but I didn't really think I'd get too deep into everything. But so much has happened, with my involvement in wrestling in the last since that was 2013 when that book came out. In the last 10 years, so many things have happened, for me and to me, and it's just a lot to tell. And so I'm kind of going to try to do that and catch up on that, and then go back and tell those stories about working in Japan and overseas, and the global stories, that story and that kind of thing. Some of the stuff we talked about.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Like you say, you're still the public eye. You got the book, hopefully coming out this year and this coming year. You still make some appearances and do some different things. Is there anything else you got on your schedule that you want to plug? Anything coming up that you want to mention?
I'll be going into St. Louis SICW that convention we did last year with Herb Simmons.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was his first one last year, and it was very successful. And I'll be going back again this year to that one. This year it's going to be in May, so that's a little bit earlier than it was last year. And then, of course, I'm still involved in Cauliflower Alley. I go there, and I've been very involved with the Tragus Fez Hall of Fame. I've been working with the board there, and that's been kind of a passion for me too. I've really gotten involved with that and become very close to all those folks, and that's something that's very special to me. So I'll be doing that and probably making a few other appearances here and there. The Comic-Con type things here and there. And then I'm getting called all the time since this movie's come out. About doing.
I bet.
I'm sure I'll be out there doing something.
Well, so how can people follow you? How can they keep up to watch for those appearances so they know when they can go out and meet you?
Yeah, I'm I'm not a big social media guy. I do have well, it's not it's X now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, X. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah,
it's still Twitter to me.
Yeah, I've got a deal there, but I just mostly kind of just keep up with the guys there. And Facebook, same way. I post things that I'm doing, and not very much personal stuff on there, but you can get in touch with me that way easily. If I check on it, and if anybody's looking for me, they can catch me through Facebook somehow.
Yeah. Well, everybody just watch for events in your area. Maybe you'll see James pop up. You never know. He stays busy. Like you said, you've had a long storied career, and it's not done yet. You're still out there making towns and doing your thing. And and that's a good thing. Like I said, man, we talked for an hour, and I feel like I don't feel like we even touched the tip of what we could have talked about. We didn't even dive into that NWA stuff, and I wanted to, but it's like, we talked so long, so we'll have to have you back on again in the future, James, and dive into some of that other stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. That was an interesting experience. From the time I got involved to the time it sold, it was interesting for sure.
Bet. Yeah, that's a wild time for the NWA. It's unique. There's a lot going on. A lot of people trying to reestablish it, trying to keep it alive. It kind of was like a roller coaster there for a few years. Yeah. And then it changed shape when it sold to Billy, and it's a little different beast now.
Yeah, I was always a kind of an NWA guy, and still am. I still have that my blood, I guess. And
Yep.
I root for them. You know,
I do too.
I haven't done anything with them in a while, but I root for them. I got a lot of friends there, and
Yep.
you know, so yeah, that's a special thing for me too.
Yeah, you mentioned Tim Storm. He's always there. You know, he's done a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of commentary, wrestled there. I mean, I had him on the show a long time because Tim's a great guy. I mean, just a smart, great guy.
Yeah, I talked to him yesterday. He's probably as close a friend as I have, and
Yeah.
he and John Layfield, those two guys are very special friends, and
Yeah,
you know, you do pretty good when you got guys like that.
absolutely. Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. So, yeah, like I said, what to have you on, especially if that book does, if your second book does, get a release date in 2024, we'll have you back on. We'll plug the book, tell a few more stories, and try to push people to get that book. But all for now, if everybody go out and get the first book, so that you can prepare yourself for the second. But James, thank you for your time, and thank you for coming on. And everybody, go out, like I said, order James' book, go out and see the Iron Claw, support that. And watch for James. You never know when James Beard is going to show up in your area. He's out there. So yeah. But thanks, James, for your time. I appreciate it. And well, like I said, we'll talk to you again in the future.
All right, Dave. Anytime, you bet.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wrestling Fans International Association is back. That's right, the premier fan club association of the 1970s and 1980s has been revived and is back in business. Join today. It's free at thewfia.org. That's thewfia.org. You can also join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/WFIA 1969.
All right, and welcome back to Wrestling Nostalgia. I am Dave Dynasty. Special thanks to James Beard for coming on and doing that interview. It was a lot of fun, like I said, and I look forward to having James on again in the near future. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview. Like I said, our first of 2024. I'm excited about what this year is going to bring. We got a lot of special guests lined up, a lot of people I want to talk to, a lot of information that I want to dive into, events, wrestlers, cards, promotions, that you name it, man. I want to do some deep dives. I love research, and I love getting into it, so I look forward to 2024. Make sure you subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you like and that you are listening to us. And if the option is there, give us a rating and a review, because that helps us in those algorithms and helps us come up as a suggested listen for others. Make sure you follow us on social media. We're on X, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads as Wrestle Nostalgia. You can follow me personally on Twitter at The Dave Dynasty. And probably the best way to financially support the show is to go buy one of our shirts. You can go to PROWRESTLINGTEES.com/The Dave Dynasty. Got a lot of shirts there, a lot to choose from. Maybe you got a little Christmas money burning a hole in your pocket. Well, hey, go support us. Go buy a shirt. Win-win. And you're kicking your new year off with a bang. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And like I said earlier, hey, man, just be positive. Support what you like. Ignore what you don't. Let's have a good year, guys. Let's make wrestling a big success in 2024. So support what you love in the year. But until that new episode in 2 weeks, wherever you go and whatever you do, be good, be safe, and always keep on growing.